Hey, yo, what's up? It is Roy here, and I'm willing to bet you can guess what we're going to talk about. It is June 24th, 2022, and Roe V Wade was overturned today by the Supreme Court. Now, let's have this conversation because there's some good points here, stuff I want to talk about. People that don't make sense, and some things that don't make sense. So I'm going to start with this. I had to listen to, unfortunately, on the news, Democratic Elizabeth Warren ranting and raving about how Roe v. Wade violated, or it being overturned, violated these women's rights, and they have to be nasty now and fight and get their rights back and blah, 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 blah. And she made this statement. She said, our mothers, our mothers and our grandmothers had, children and with the confidence of knowing that they had their rights to abortion guaranteed. Time out. Elizabeth Warren, you were born in the 40s, I believe, maybe 1950. You're like 70 something years old. So no, ma'am, your mother nor your grandmother had any idea of Roe v. Wade when you came along. In fact, for most of your life, there was no Roe v. Wade. They also clearly didn't want that choice because you're here. As well as all the women you were speaking to today, their parents didn't want it because they're here. So if you're going to rant and rave on the news, maybe say something that actually makes sense. Something that's practical, something that actually applies to what you're on there ranting and raving about. Now let's discuss this. This ruling being overturned is not changing anybody's ability to get an abortion. It is not saying you could not go get an abortion now. It is simply saying it is not the government's place to tell us that an abortion is right or wrong. It is simply allowing that decision to be passed down to individual states to make that decision. And the government is taking a little bit of their hand off of the control switch, which is what we all want. The government shouldn't be controlling us. The government works for us. They don't tell us what to do. So it's not changing anything. If you want to still get one, you could still get one. Go by what your state laws are. Some states are more strict than others. Some allow it very late in the term, and some don't. So figure it out. But, maybe consider this as well. Maybe realize there are consequences for your actions, just like any other crime in the law. And if you do something, you're not free from the consequences of it. So if you decide to go have sex, there's a possible consequence of said sex, and that's a baby. And so nobody should expect to be guaranteed the right to kill said baby because you were irresponsible with your body and you're not ready for this kid, or, oh, I made a mistake. I don't want to have this kid. No, you made a choice. You're paying the consequences for that choice. And I'm willing to bet your God-given motherly instinct will kick in as you are growing that baby and when that baby is born. And if you just give it a chance, I'm willing to bet things will change and you're going to end up loving that kid. Just, throwing it out there because, that God-given mother's nature is there. So let's consider that. But let's keep going. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So these same people that are throwing a fit today because they no longer have the freedom to go get an abortion. They no longer have the freedom to kill their kid. Are the same people screaming that we need gun control because children are being killed in mass murders. People are being killed in mass murders. So you're outraged about guns because people are being killed but you want the right to kill babies. How does that work? Can't have it both ways. And I know the Democrats right now are going to come back at me and, well, you're supporting Roe v. Wade being overturned, but you're going to hold on to the right that the government should tell us that we have the right to keep and bear arms. Yeah, you're right, I am. Because the government doesn't have to tell me that I have the right to keep and bear arms, because that is my right, period. And the government shouldn't have any say in it. So without the right to keep and bear arms, without the Second Amendment, it's something that I naturally can still do. I can still maintain that as my right. I don't need the government to tell me if I can or cannot have a gun. If you outlaw guns, then I just become an outlaw. It's that simple. The same people, mind you now, that are screaming about let's get rid of the guns are the same people who are walking around protected by guns every single day. And if somebody breaks in your house, you're not going to just sit there and let them take everything. You're going to wish you had a cop there who had a gun or some other armed security or a gun yourself to defend yourself. So, yeah. Gun control, that's a load. Forget about it. You can't sit there and scream about gun control and scream about an abortion right at the same time. Just doesn't work. But let's go just a little bit further into this. So, I saw and heard multiple times Christianity and Christians referred to today as a minority. I saw us referred to as extremist. We are now a minority of extremists who got our way today because a nearly 50-year-old court ruling got overturned, and we're a minority extremist. At the same time, you're threatening protests tonight. Or wait, let me correct myself. The exact words were threatening violence and protest tonight. So we're the extremists, but you're threatening violence and protest. Oh wait, January 6th, you know that thing that y'all still like to bring up where it was we were terrorists and all these conservatives were terrorists and these protests were just terrible, and you're threatening to do the same thing. Oh wait, you've also done the same thing prior to January 6th, and it was okay when y'all were doing it. But because it was conservatives and because it was Christians, some, doing it, then it was wrong. That's the only time it was wrong. It's only wrong when it's conservatives and Christians because we're a minority extremist now. You're calling me an extremist and a minority while you're shouting that you're going to induce violence tonight and riot around the Capitol, around the Supreme Court, because you don't like a ruling of something that, quite honestly, isn't going to affect your life at all whatsoever. Speaking of people's lives who it's not going to affect at all whatsoever, let's talk about what else we saw on TV. I saw a man who identified and dressed as a woman screaming and crying because his rights to an abortion had been violated. Buddy, I got news for you. You can't have a baby anyways, so your rights weren't violated. You can't have a baby. You're a man. You can't have a baby. I'm sorry. Your rights weren't violated. Here's another part of this. You know what the large majority of the group at the Capitol was today? The large majority of the group that was up there protesting was the LGBTQ plus community. They were the ones. A large number of it was them, that group, protesting Roe v. Wade. So the very group who chooses, elects, born this way, however, that associate as male and male couples and female couples, the very group that partakes in that, let's use that word, partakes in same-sex marriage, same-sex couples, are the ones protesting the hardest about Roe v. Wade. But y'all can't have kids living in the current situation that you're in. If you're a man with a man, you can't have a kid. So in no way did Roe v. Wade violate your rights today. If you're a woman living with a woman, y'all can't get together and have kids. So in no way did Roe v. Wade violate your rights today. It just didn't. It doesn't work that way. So here's the real story. Let's just break it out right now and I'm going to end this. But here's the real story. You know what all the screaming is about? You know what all the uproar is about? And why Christians are being referred to as a minority extremist group? You know why? Because it's sin. S-I-N. Sin. It's all sin. That's the only reason it's wrong. See, that's the thing. When Christians do something, it's wrong. Oh, it's wrong to the rest of the world. But when the rest of the world does something, while we sit back and we're like quiet and we're like, all right, cool. Hey, Roe v. Wade was overturned. All right, cool. Now we're going to actually realize that it doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. And we're going to wait and see what happens coming later when this all gets, directed down to the states and the states have to make these decisions. So we're going to sit by and realize that an unlawful ruling that was made back in the 70s has been overturned finally after nearly 50 years. That's what we're going to do. But sin is out there running rampant, coming at Christians when this has really nothing to do with Christians. We're not the ones that made this decision today. Our minority extremist group didn't make this decision today. But it's sin. You realize that. So the men that think they're women that are screaming about Roe v. Wade violating their rights, they're only mad because it's the sin that they're mad about, because it doesn't affect them. So the only thing they could be mad about is it's one sin that's been legally taken off of the federal book. It's one sin that was taken off, and so they're screaming because that sin is no longer lawful. That's it. That's what it boils down to. It doesn't boil down to conservatism. It doesn't boil down to liberalism. It doesn't boil down to right, left, black, white, none of that. It boils down to sin and what's right and what's wrong. That's it. Nothing more to it. You're mad because sin and the devil lost just a little bit of ground today. A little bit of ground today. But it's okay. I'm going to pray for you. I want to pray for all of you. And I'm going to pray that you are enlightened eventually. And I'm going to pray you're enlightened before it's too late. Because one day, every knee will bow. Every head will bow. And everyone will see God for who he is and recognize him as who he is. And I pray you have realized that what you're upset about is sin and not an actual court ruling. And I pray that you find God before it's your time. Oh, by the way, the very lady who the Roe v. Wade court case is after is a born-again Christian who is absolutely sick and hates her decision and everything that went into Roe v. Wade. If that very woman who has killed kids, who has had abortions, and is the cause for the original case, can realize that sin was the reason for it all, and can realize that God loves her even more than that sin, that God died to forgive her of that sin. If even the very woman that this whole case was named after can realize that, you can too. So I am going to pray for you. And appreciate you watching this, if you're actually still watching it. Love y'all.